Ready.
Hi everyone, Alex Ranieri here, Program Co-Director with Healthy Democracy.
And hey, Flynn Davis, Program Co-Director with Healthy Democracy.
So we are coming back to you to re-record a section of our June 4th session of the Petaluma Fairgrounds Advisory Panel. Unfortunately, the live stream cut in and out a little bit, so we want to make sure that the recording of this presentation, which will be important for panelists, especially moving forward, is accessible and available. So panelists, hello, thanks for watching. To members of the public, this is the presentation we gave on June 4th, a couple of weeks ago, to panelists introducing their first primary report, which is on principles that should guide decision-making about the future of the fairgrounds. So thanks for tuning in. We'll dive into the presentation that we gave to panelists. So we're shifting gears slightly from the content of the panel's work on its first session, May 13th through 15th, and starting to think about the first report that the panel will deliver in June or July. So after all of the panel's information gathering efforts, your information gathering efforts, this will be kind of the first opportunity to really deliberate about your opinions about this topic and start to make some decisions with your fellow panelists. So principles and options are a couple concepts we need to tease out in order to begin to think about that report. Actually, I'm going to walk back a little bit here and just point out where this fits into the process overall. So as we pointed out a couple weeks ago, sessions 1, 2, and 3 all have some information gathering components. And then where we are right now is this overlap section between information gathering, where panelists are still hearing from presenters, absorbing a lot of information about the topic, and also starting to get into this more deliberative phase around values and principles. So just to note that graphically as well, that's where we are in the process. So principles and options. I'm going to give a couple examples of decisions where we might use these two concepts. So example 1 is getting a dog. I recently got a dog a few months ago, rescue. So this is my example, near and dear to my heart. And these are some examples of principles that might have guided my decision. But to think about principles, we might say, I care about X, Y, and Z. Getting a dog, that 1 will be very receptive to training. 2, that I can take on long hikes. Love to hike in Oregon. 3, that might help get rid of the rodents in my yard. Maybe I want a dog that hunts. Likes to cuddle on the couch. I love a snuggly dog that won't make my allergies worse. Got enough allergies these days in Oregon as it is. And has a chance of winning the ugly dog contest, which I've just found out or just learned in Petaluma is a fantastic event that I hope to attend someday. I want a dog that has a chance. So those are principles. Those are kind of values that I might take into account in making a decision. And then these are examples of options, right? So breeds. This is kind of a one-dimensional decision. Obviously, there are many other layers of options I might think of in addition to breeds, like age, whether or not to get a rescue or from a breeder. But just to keep this example simple, we're going to talk about one layer of options. So a pit bull, option number 1. Border collie, option number 2. Look at that cute face. And a Mexican hairless. Look at that very cute face. And this is how we might move from principles to options in decision making. This is really familiar. Probably all of us do this to some extent. We take our values into account as we consider many different options that are available to us. So a pit bull can definitely take on long hikes. Might be good at hunting the rodents in my yard. Will probably like to cuddle on the couch, not always, but probably. and won't make my allergies worse. You can go down the list for the others. A border collie, much more receptive to training, also can take on the hikes, likes to cuddle, but ultimately that's 3 of the 4 options. So the pit bull's still looking pretty good. The Mexican hairless, probably a cuddler, also definitely won't make my allergies worse, and is the only one that has a chance, I think, of winning the ugly dog contest. So maybe I weight that more, but if we're going numerically, the pit bull is probably going to win. And I love pit bulls, so this is a very self-serving example. But I think a key piece to highlight here is that each option satisfied many different principles, and vice versa. A principle might satisfy or might be satisfied by several different options. So we can kind of go back and forth, but this is the first step at teasing out what are the values guiding a decision and what are the actual decisions or components of a decision being made. All right, over to you, Lynn.
All right, so I'm going to do an example from my life fairly recently, moving into a new home. And so this is about finding a new place to live. And in this one, we're going to look at sort of the next level of complication. And this will be more similar to what you all are dealing with, although still certainly very simplified, of course. So on the left here, we've got a number of principles, and these are brainstormed as you will do without judgment. Just let's get everything on the table. What are all the potential principles that should be considered? And these all kind of start with, I would really like to find a home blank. The sort of why, what's important to me, basically. And on the right-hand side here, we have a bunch of brainstormed options. Again, at first, laid out without judgment. Let's get all the options on the table. Ones that I might like, ones that I might not like. Let's just get them out there. And so these are, things that a home might be in the city or in the country, etc. So on the left here, we've got, for example, principles like, I'd really like a home where my kids can go to a large public school, or where my kids can easily get out into nature, or a home that's quiet and surrounded by open space, or that's in a bustling neighborhood full of activities, or that doesn't require my family to drain our savings. And right away, let me acknowledge that some of these, as you can see, are either directly contradictory or sort of contradictory. They might be at odds with each other. And that's a-okay, and that's absolutely going to happen in your process as well, where folks will be putting all, again, without judgment, all the potential principles on the table. You can see on the options side, obviously, that's true as well. A house or a home cannot be both an apartment and a remote cabin in the woods, probably. Get all the options out on the table, and then we'll start sort of evaluating the principles, and then later on, evaluating the options. So let's take the next step here. What's going to happen in your process once you've got all the principles out on the table there is to start to prioritize. In this case, you can see that the principles have shifted around in order because they've gotten different numbers of votes. Now, this is sort of imagining that all of us in this room on the panel and staff are all together making this decision about the one home that we're all going to move into. That's sort of imagine that as the scenario here. And let's say there were 20 votes among the group that said that this was a really important principle to not require our collective family to drain our savings. Maybe 14 votes, the bustling neighborhood, 14 votes, kids getting out in nature, 9 votes, the quiet and open space, and 6 votes, kids going to a large public school. Now, we start to be able to match some of these up with options. So let's take that first principle. The first principle might point us toward an apartment, or it could point us toward a remote cabin in the woods. Maybe both of those are more affordable options. And it might point us toward a smaller place. Now, whether it points us toward the city or the country, maybe that one doesn't really point us either way there, potentially. Let's take the next one. So the next one here, a bustling neighborhood, that might point us toward the city. Maybe that is sort of, that's kind of the option that one is really tied to. Next. The next option here, kids getting out into nature, well, that might point us toward the country, and also this remote cabin in the woods, which, you know, sounds great. And as you can see here, we're starting to, as Alex did in her example, line principles up, attach them to different options. And as she pointed out just now, you can see that a single principle might point to multiple different options. And a single option might be justified sort of by more than one principle. But you can start to see here, oh, okay, we're working our way through this sort of prioritized list of principles, and we're getting to some of the options that might be more preferable than others. Maybe we're looking at a smaller place, 1 to 2 bedrooms. Maybe we're looking at an apartment or this remote cabin, but maybe not a house because of affordability, and that's not satisfying some other things. Next. So now to take the next step forward, and this you won't be doing for a little while, but just to give the full picture of how this is going to kind of play out so you can kind of see how this is going to progress. What's going to happen then is you're going to start putting options together, bundling options into what is an actual proposal. And you're going to be creating multiple different proposals. So in this case, one proposal might be, how about an apartment in the city, but that's next to a park? Okay, so that's maybe good for, you know, a less expensive option. That's maybe satisfies principle number 1, maybe satisfies principle number 2. It's a little bit of bustling neighborhood. Maybe it satisfies principle number 5. And maybe it sort of partially satisfies principle number 3 here. Kids getting out in nature. Okay, it's just a park, but maybe it's a little bit of a compromise there. Next. Another option might be a cabin on some land outside of town, but that's not very far outside of town. So you can see again here, that satisfies a number of options, and maybe that's a little bit of a nod toward option number 2, even though it's not marked there. So anyway, so that's sort of the next step, to put these options together, and you can see immediately how these principles are going to be really, really helpful in doing that, to helping to identify sort of what's most important, and therefore where you're going to spend your energy to put options together to create these sort of proposals that are going to be the strongest and have the most support from the panel. Next. So just as a review here, principles are these sort of values or criteria that guide decision making, and options are the actual components of a decision that might meet one or more principle. And one way that you can tell them apart is that often if you're looking at a statement and you're trying to decide whether it's a principle or an option, maybe ask yourself, does this answer a question about why? Why is this important? And if you can still answer a question about why it's important, then maybe it's an option, and actually the answer to the question why is the principle. And just as an example from that previous example, maybe you're like, cabin in the woods. Cabin in the woods sounds pretty great. But if you ask yourself why does it sound great? Now the answer to that question is going to be some principles. All right, next. So just to throw up here, and you're going to get these in paper form, but these are a couple examples. I forget if we have 1 or 2 examples of a previous process where the panel put together principles. This one is from an assembly that we did in 2020 on COVID recovery, very optimistic, in Oregon. And the panel put together a number of principles. Next. I think we zoom in a little bit here. Yes. Around what decision makers should consider in making decisions related to COVID recovery. So for example, the first one here is Oregon's response should be guided by the best available science and research. The second one is every person has a right to safe, clean, and livable housing. You can see these are sort of overarching kind of concepts, values that the panel thought were most important. Next. So this is going to be the activity we're going to do next time we see each other, just as a sort of refresher to think of a decision that you've made recently and list some principles and list some options.
Great. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.